And welcome into the latest edition of the Reserve Squad podcast. My name is Andy Mook, and this is Tyler Gelinas. Great to be with you all here, and it's great to be back to talk all things English Premier League. We've been away for a little bit, handling some personal stuff, but we're ready to get back into it. And with an exciting English Premier League season that we are having so far, there's a lot of stuff to discuss. So we will just preface everything real quick. We are going to be moving our podcast to bi-weekly, and then we'll start having more regular social media content for us. So make sure you guys are following us on all of our social media platforms. You can catch all of our podcasts on Spotify and YouTube, and we're looking to get onto Apple's streaming service on Apple Music pretty soon for podcasts. So stay tuned for more information on that. And then you can also follow us on our social media accounts. We have Spotify, or I already mentioned Spotify, but we have Facebook and Instagram just at the Reserve Squad. So be sure to check us out so you can catch all of our content. So it's been a long time since we recorded, so we're just going to kind of jump straight into this. There is a lot to discuss. Big headliner. This has pretty much been in the news all day today. There were rumors happening about it last night, but it seems like it came to fruition as of this morning. Frank Lampard has officially been sacked as the Chelsea head coach. And it is rumored and reported by a couple different media outlets that it looks like Thomas Tuchel will be the manager to be replacing him. So Tyler, I know that this has been pretty much all over our social media platforms all day today. We've been talking about it throughout the day. So let me just get your first initial impression on the Frank Lampard situation with Chelsea.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad to be back too. Obviously, it's been a while, and I'm glad that we got together and discussed a way to move forward. And I hope that everyone that follows us can look forward to a little bit more consistency, a little bit more activity on the social media side, and everything else. My initial thoughts of the Frank Lampard thing, when I saw it this morning, I was a little surprised that they actually pulled the trigger on it. Personally, I think it's a little too soon. I know we're going to go into a little bit more detail into what our feelings and everything are on it, but to be honest with you, I actually kind of feel bad for Chelsea fans a little bit because Lampard's a legend there, and it's only been 18 months that he's been at the helm, and all of a sudden he's gone. Tuchel is a good direction to go. I'm always been a fan of Tuchel, but my initial reaction is that I think it's a little bit too soon. I would have preferred for Frank to get the rest of the season at a bare minimum. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on why I feel that way in a second here. But what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I share the same sentiment in the aspect of Frank is a club legend. Frank has been a popular player ever since you and I were kids. So in terms of that attachment, it definitely sucks to see him go. I feel like when you kind of look at it from both sides of the coin, whether with Frank's inexperience, there's a lot of things to kind of factor into this situation. And I don't think that there is a clear-cut answer. I can't say that I'm surprised, but when you look at the history of Chelsea and their history with managers, Abramovich has been I'm pretty sure Chelsea have fired the most managers in the past couple of years. I don't know the exact statistic off the top of my head, but they've fired the most coaches, I'm pretty sure, in the last, I think it's like 4 or 5, maybe even 7 years, something of that time frame. So someone can fact check me on that. But, when you're going through that many managers, it's not surprising to see that they would take this swift of action, this early into the season. But, I mean, granted, when you look at the current state of Chelsea, they're currently sitting in 9th place with 29 points. 19 games played, which is a couple more games played than the surrounding teams that are near them, having only registered 1 win in their last 5 games, with 3 of those games being losses. I mean, it feels like it kind of just came thick and fast for Chelsea, and all of a sudden their form just started to dip, and they just couldn't find that consistency. So there's a lot of things to ask right now, but in your opinion, do you feel like that was the right decision?
No. So I hear you, right? And I think all of the points you make just now with their position, their form, and like you said, everything kind of happened so fast. In that sense, I do hear that side of the argument as to why Frank Lampard would be sacked. I also think it's important to realize if Thomas Tuchel is not on the market right now, this may not happen. He's a huge marketable manager, and he's someone who's had a relationship with Thiago Silva. He's had a relationship with Christian Pulisic, and he's got a German background to him, so that may potentially help Havertz and Werner. But the reason I say no is because, number one, first of all, I'm a little bit of a bias in terms of I personally feel that coaches deserve a hell of a lot longer than 18 months when they first take over. I also think that this is the first season where Frank finally got a transfer budget and was able to make moves and kind of start to build his own team. He got some new players in, and I just don't really feel like he had a full season's worth of a chance because he didn't. And if you really, really dig down into it, right, in the beginning of this season, their 3 main purchases were Havertz, Ziyech, and Werner, right? And obviously they bring in Thiago Silva. Silva's done great. They bring in Chilwell. I think he's done okay. But those first three, Havertz ends up with COVID, and he misses a lot of the beginning phases of practice. He's out for 2 weeks. He struggles to get into the team in the beginning. Werner starts out okay, but gets on a little bit of a cold streak. You know, that happens to strikers when they transition from any other league to the Premier League. That's a huge jump, you know, from league to league, let alone system to system. And then Ziyech got injured, right? He was out for 2 months. And so your three biggest investments, you had one of them on the field and he was adjusting. And to me, I just think that there hasn't been enough time with all of them gelling together to really figure it out. On top of that, Pulisic has been in and out of the injury list too. And I just think there's been a lot that hasn't been in Frank's control. And for that reason alone, I think he deserved a little bit more of a chance, right? Compare what's going on at Arsenal with the Arteta situation. They start the season all the way down. I saw them at 16th place at one point. They hang on to Arteta, and while they're not where they want to be, they're sitting in 11th place right now, 7 points behind 4th place in the table.
And they won 4 out of their last 5 games.
Right. So to me, I think there just needed to be a little bit more trust and faith, and I think Frank should have been given a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, considering he is a club legend there. And like I said before, if I'm a Chelsea fan, I'm left wanting a little bit more. And to be honest, I would hope that he comes back in some sort of fashion. But I just think that that's kind of wishful thinking at this point. And I think that there were some things that may or may not have been considered. But ultimately, Thomas Tuchel is how they're going to move forward. I think he's a great manager. I think he obviously is coming from a Champions League final with PSG. I disagreed with PSG letting him go. But Pochettino was out there. So, you know, there's a lot of manager movement going on this year. It still feels like 2020. And I'm excited to see what happens with Chelsea here and if they can turn it around. But I think it's a little harsh to blame Frank for all of the bad things that have happened there this season.
Yeah, I think those are all fair points too. And I definitely share your sentiment on a few of those different areas. But I guess I'm kind of more. I guess I'm more in the middle. Like I'm of the opinion that I feel like whichever decision that they made, I would have understood because I agree with you. Frank has not been given enough time. I mean, but then again, he also doesn't have as much managerial experience. So I can definitely understand that sentiment. I definitely side with you more in the sense that managers should be given more time. And I guess before I dig into the reasons why I kind of see the reason for them sacking him, two big examples of this right now would be Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Like a couple months ago, he was looked at as being in the hot seat because of Man U's poor form. He turned it around. Arsenal, same thing. I mean, they were looking like they were in like 15th place for a while, and now they're 4 wins in their last 5 games. They turned it around. Now they're back in 11th place, and they're starting to get that rhythm again. So I think a lot of the big differences for why players and why teams haven't been performing as consistent as they would like to is mostly because of the fans not being in the stadium. So I think that definitely has a large impact. So I think that it's just all the teams are struggling in general. And I think in that sense, sacking Frank might have been a little bit more premature. But when I look at what Frank has been doing during the times that they've been struggling, he hasn't really changed anything. And I guess that's the part that kind of makes me understand why they sacked him, because he still kept running the same 4-3-3 formation. He was just kind of interchanging a few players. Werner was out of form for probably about, I don't know off the top of my head, I want to say it was 4 or 5, maybe 6 games. He still continued to start him and to get him out of that rut. But I just feel like Frank didn't change anything when his team is starting to struggle. And I think that is due to his lack of experience. And I think that's part of the reason why they might not have given him the full length of the season. So, because personally, I think Chelsea should be running with a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-5-1, however you look at it. But I just feel like, you know, with Ollie, for example, when I go back to him, he's been running a 4-2-3-1. He's also moved into a 4-4-2 with a diamond formation. He's tried different things in order to see what he can get out of his squad. And I don't feel like Frank has really taken too many of those chances to change the formation, put people in different positions. It just seems like he's rotating the squad in and out, but it's not doing anything to get the best out of the players that he has. And I think that's where the issue was. And then you touched on it earlier too, how Tuchel was on the market. I think that was ultimately the reason what pushed him over the edge. But I do feel for Frank. I do think that Frank will definitely get another managerial opportunity. And it's funny that you mentioned that you'd love to see Frank back at Chelsea. I do too. I think that as he gets more experience, now that he's been at the helm for a big club, there's a lot of clubs that would take a chance on him because now he has some of that experience. I just don't think it'll be a major side like one of the big the Big Six or Big Seven in any of the Big Five major leagues. I think it'll probably be like an average Premier League side, probably, just to start off with. But now that we've kind of broken down Frank a little bit, I guess, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for Tuchel?
I think it's going to be the same thing that was the biggest challenge for Frank. He's got to get all of these new personalities in this locker room to gel together. And maybe it is switching to a 4-2-3-1. Maybe it's something completely different. I don't know, but he's got to get results. And I think the results will come if the locker room can gel. And I think if the chemistry gets there, that the team's got a ton of talent. Tuchel's no stranger to managing a ton of talent. He's got familiar faces with him. And I think he's capable of doing it. But in the sense that, Frank's biggest challenge was bringing in all these transfers and combining them with the youth that he brought up with through Chelsea and their youth program as he was managing them down there. Getting them to mold together was his biggest challenge. I think it's the same thing for Tuchel. And whether or not he's going to be capable of that, we'll see. I do want to say one thing. I thought of it when you were mentioning Frank. While I think they were premature in sacking them, I think I would argue that they were premature in hiring him too. I think they wanted to bring in a player, legend like a lot of other clubs have. Juventus with Pirlo, Mikel Arteta, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. A lot of clubs are doing that nowadays, but it didn't work out apparently, and then they sacked him. I think everything was just a little premature, and I hope that they give Thomas Tuchel the right chance because he's a good manager too. And that to me, I feel is like going to be his biggest challenge is getting everybody to be on the same page and buy into whatever system he has moving forward. And I would love to see a 4-2-3-1, like you said. Obviously, being a biased Bayern Munich fan, we run that very successfully. I think it's similar to a 4-3-3, but there are minor differences that would have changed a lot, in my opinion. You're right. Frank did not make any kind of adjustments in that sense. So interesting to see there. What about you? What are your thoughts on challenges for Tuchel moving forward?
Well, I mean, when you look at Tuchel and how he was at PSG, it seems like a lot of the things that he struggled to do at PSG was to manage the big high profile names like the Neymars and Mbappe, and get them to play into a system and get them to believe in the system that he's trying to push within the team. So that was rumors of things that he struggled with, but I don't think there is really anyone in that Chelsea side that's like a completely major name, someone that has that big of an ego, someone that maybe like a Neymar and Mbappe might have had behind closed doors and how that culture was at PSG. So I think that's going to be in his favor this time. And I think he's going to be walking into a team that wants to play better. I think the difference was, I just feel like the dressing room was somewhat divided at Chelsea, or something was going on behind closed doors, because when you watch them play, it just looks like there was no unity. Like the team wasn't playing as a team. It just seemed like they were kind of out there, and everyone was doing a bunch of individual performances. I didn't really see too much team effort. But going back to the formation a little bit, why I think a 4-2-3-1 would be so beneficial was the build-up play from their midfield to their wingers was just so slow, and they would always just play it out to the sides, versus they wouldn't have any link-up play in the center of the midfield, and I just feel like they never had much penetration. So I feel like with all of them being more compact in the middle of the park, as well as a little bit up in the attacking third, I think that'll give them more outlets to be successful.
Yeah, I think too. I agree with that. And if I could add a secondary challenge for Thomas Tuchel, I think it's going to be the fact that he's moving to the Premier League itself. As a manager, if you think about Pep and Klopp, because they've been arguably two of the more successful managers here in the Premier League as of late. They came from La Liga, Bundesliga, different areas. And I think where they succeed is in the politics of the Premier League, right? In the press conferences, working with the officials and managing a lot more games, right? When you're a successful club in the Premier League and you're successful in the league, you're successful in both cups, you're successful in Europe, you're playing 60 plus games a season. Tuchel's, to my knowledge, has been successful at the Bundesliga level and at the French league level. And those are a little bit different than the Premier League. So I think that's going to be a step too. And a lot of the players that he's got to find a way to gel are also making that step. And maybe that will help, is that everyone's making the same step together. I don't know. But I think it'll be interesting to see how his managerial tactics change as he manages through the Premier League and its challenges in and of itself. And you can't forget, too, a lot of these lingering effects are happening from COVID as well. These guys have all played a lot of games in a short amount of time, and that's not changing anytime soon. And so the pressure is really on the managers to be able to handle that. And that to me will be a secondary challenge for him as well.
But he also has some good things going for him too. I mean, he's he's got some new German players that are in the lineup, and he speaks German, so he's going to be able to relate to them pretty well. He'll probably have their buy-in. He's worked with Pulisic back when he was at Dortmund, so he has that history as well. I think the biggest challenge for Tuchel going into this is he needs to earn the dressing room of the English players, players that may not know him as much. Because if he's able to combine both, if he's able to get everyone into a team mindset and play towards a system that everyone can get behind, I think Chelsea will be one of the most formidable teams in the English Premier League. But it's just going to come down to the players, and now honestly, it's a pretty big gamble on Chelsea sacking Frank at this point, because now Tuchel has a lot of pressure to in order to bring them back into the top four. And if it doesn't work, then at that point they might as well have just kept Frank, because then they could have made a decision towards the end of the season. But I feel like we could probably harp on this one a lot, and I know we have other topics that we want to get to. Is there anything you'd like to close this one out on?
I mean, I think you're right. He's got 19 games left, I think, if I did my math correct, which is exactly the amount of games that Frank managed for the Premier League here. So we'll see who ends up with the better record. But I think the key thing to end it on is going to be Thiago Silva, to get the English players to believe in Thomas Tuchel, because he's the leader of that back four. He's just a different presence on that field, and he's coming from the same place Tuchel is, and coming from a deep run in the Champions League. So he knows what it's like to do that and be successful on all aspects of Europe. And I think if he can help, I think he can be a major help for Thomas Tuchel in getting that locker room to believe in. And I hope for Chelsea's sake that they're able to do it. Also, as a fan, I'm a little upset too, because I kind of wanted Tuchel to take Jogi Löw's place as German manager, because they've got their own shenanigans that they're dealing with. But Chelsea's got him, so we'll see how things go.
Yeah, and also that's a good point. I honestly forgot about Thiago Silva, because that was Tuchel's skipper last year. He was the captain of PSG when they had that run last year. So definitely have a good working relationship already. So it's not like he's a total stranger to the team. And honestly, I think if they're picking a candidate, Tuchel's probably the best one that's available right now. And I do know that there were rumors of Chelsea trying to see if they could get Nagelsmann, but I think Leipzig put the hammer down. We're like, we're not getting rid of him, especially midseason. So I think that if that was something that they were looking to do, it'd probably have to be a down the road type thing. But and I don't know this for sure. This is just based on reports, but I think Nagelsmann to the English Premier League is bound to happen eventually. But it seemed like they were looking for a German coach to be able to bridge the gap for everybody, and it seems like Tuchel will fit that profile. So we'll wait and see what that looks like. We wish Chelsea all the best. We wish Frank all the best. But moving on here, we're going to talk a little bit about the title race. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and just read off what the top six currently looks like, and then we'll break it down a little bit further from that. So currently at number one, we have Manchester United with 19 games played at 40 points. Manchester City with 18 games played with 38 points. So they are one game down from the league leaders. If they were to win that, they would jump into first. We have Leicester City with 19 games played, also at 38 points. Liverpool with 19 games played with 34 points. Tottenham, 18 games played, 33 points. And Everton, 17 games played with 32 points. So the table's pretty tight up top. There's a couple teams that are a little bit short on games. So there's a lot to kind of break down from this. But I guess just looking at the top six, it's been a long time since you and I have talked about the Premier League, all of us actually. So, obviously we have a couple months of content that we would need to build up on. But what are your initial thoughts so far on the top six and how the league is going so far?
Man, what a season, right? This top six is not at all what I imagined. Now, when we first did our predictions, you guys can check them out on our Instagram page. If you want to poke some fun at us, they're a little bit different, right? My top three, I believe I had Liverpool, City, and Tottenham. Now, all of those teams are in the top six, but not at all where I predicted them. I will be first to say I had United finishing seventh this year, and they're leading the table. So there's been quite a few surprises, in my opinion. And again, it's the start of the 2020-2021 season. So nothing short of crazy. I think it's important to note that while we are here to break down the top six, 4th through 11th is really close too. The relegation battle is pretty interesting. There's a lot to look into in the Premier League this year. And even when you look at the FA Cup, there's been some crazy results. So just really, really exciting in general. Excited to have the different nuances and challenges and see some change of pace. And I think that the title race is going to be between more than one or two teams this year. And for me, that's the key takeaway. I've been waiting for that for a couple years now. It's always been City, Liverpool for the last little bit here. And to see United at the top of the table, to see Leicester continuing to have success after their recent years, and then also seeing Tottenham get up there as well. And I like that you mentioned how many games each team has played, because that's a key in all of this too, right? Everton's sitting in 6th right now with 32 points, but they've got 2 games at hand. If they win both of those games, all of a sudden they're right there with City and Leicester. So it's really been a fun season to watch. I'm excited for the back half of it. And I think that there's going to be some questions that a lot of teams have to answer. But before we get into some of those, how do you feel about where we're at? Obviously, you're sitting at the top of the table right now, but do you think that's going to be something that can be consistent, or are you nervous? Where are you coming from?
So I think you hit it right on the head. I pretty much share the same sentiment. I just feel like that the league is so exciting right now. But when I look at this top table, I look at all the ups and downs of the season. When you look at all the teams across the board, the biggest thing is the impact of fans and how close the table is. I mean, 10 months ago when COVID-19 first hit, and we were, I guess 9 months ago when COVID already hit and we were a month out of having football. When they said they were going to come back and not have fans, we always wondered what the impact of fans would be, and we are seeing it. I mean, the table is tight across the entire board. I just feel like almost any team is 3 wins away from jumping up at least 5 places, which is really exciting, and it's a true and it shows how much the impact of fans having in the stadiums. So I think that's exciting for me. I'm looking forward to having fans back, but I think what's exciting about this season is how close and how tight everything is. So I think it's one of those things where, I mean, obviously as a United fan, I'm hoping that we can keep this form up, but I know that when I look at Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool, teams that have been doing well all season, then all of a sudden they just dip, and then all of a sudden they're out of the top 6. It can happen to anyone at this point, and we had a pretty low at the beginning of the season. So at this point, anything can happen, and I think that's what the most exciting part is about it. So, we just touched on what the top 6 looks like, but we're going to mostly break down 2 teams here. We're just going to talk about the 2 big ones, the 2 favorites leading in, the 2 favorites to win the Premier League as of the beginning of the season, Manchester City and Liverpool. But we're going to start with Liverpool because Liverpool have been have dipped the most in form of recent weeks. They've only registered 1 win of their last 7 games, and they haven't registered 1 English Premier League win in 2021. Having only picked up 3 points in their last 5 games, should we be worried about Liverpool at this point?
I think a lot of people are pressing the panic button with Liverpool right now. I'd love to hear Liverpool fans' take on what's going on. But again,
too bad Frankie couldn't be here with this one.
Yeah, I know. We'll get his take for everyone one of these days. But I think again, I'm gonna preach patience. Just like I would have liked to have seen from Liverpool, from Chelsea, what I would have liked to see from them, what we have seen from Arsenal. And obviously, Klopp at the helm, he's someone that I believe you should trust. And I think it's been a little bit of a perfect storm for Liverpool this season. Every time we talk about Liverpool, even dating back to when we all met at Frankie's place for, live recording Liverpool, the question was, how are they going to handle injuries? What are they going to do with depth? What's going to happen? And it's been a concern for them all season long. And I think we're finally starting to see it reflect in their gameplay. Yes, they've had a lot of injuries. Yes, they've got a lot of youth in the back 4. And yes, they've lost confidence. And when you combine those things together, you're going to start losing games. And when you don't have your fans at your back, like you mentioned, they end up losing their first home game. And however long it was, a long time. So that's huge. And I think that's a big part of it too. And I do believe that they're going to right the ship, but if they don't right the ship soon, it's going to be too late. Too little, too late. So I think they're 4 points down from the top of the table, is it?
6 points down. Yep.
6 points. They're 6 points down from the top of the table with 19 games remaining. That's obviously a very doable thing. I hear some of the analysts on the TV channels, I won't say which ones that I watch, talk about how Liverpool's done. And I think that's a little bit of a dramatic media plug there. I think Liverpool is not done. I think they're very much in the title race. I just think that they've got to figure out how to get their decision making better, how to gel as a team better, and start getting some results to get their confidence back. And then they're going to be right back to where they were. It starts with their next game coming up here against Tottenham. That's a huge game for Liverpool. I think that could be a make or break.
And they have important fixtures coming up. They have Tottenham, and I don't remember exactly which teams were the coming weeks. I'm pretty sure it's Tottenham, Arsenal. Who is the other one? There's another big club that I'm missing. Maybe it is Leicester.
Let me see.
I think it's Leicester. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I know that they have 3 pretty important fixtures that are coming up here. I can actually look it up over here too.
Tottenham, City on February 7th, and Leicester on the 13th.
That is.
And that's. So their February schedule. So obviously Tottenham is coming up, and West Ham is how they end January. They get Brighton on February 3rd, but starting February 7th, listen to this. They go Manchester City, Leicester City. Then they've got a Champions League round of 16 match against Leipzig. Leipzig's not a team to mess around with. And then after that, that's a Tuesday. That's a midweek match. And then that's a midweek match after the Leicester match. And then they got to go and play Everton after that. That's a tough schedule to have for February. It calms down a little bit as they move into the end of February and beginning of March. But February is going to make or break the season for Liverpool. If they can first and foremost get a decent result here against Tottenham and then have a strong February, they're going to be in the race for the title. If they falter and continue to have this form in February, people are going to start ridiculously asking for Klopp's job. But I think that February is going to be what makes or break them this year, and that's going to be very interesting to watch.
It's truly a fragile situation. I think the part that when I think about Liverpool and what's been going on recently, I think what's really odd is how Klopp has been reacting to all of this. You know, he's made all this gripe about only having 3 substitutions, but he'll only make 1 sub. And then he kind of came out with those comments about the referees before the United game. And I'm not exactly sure what he was trying to get out of that. I just feel like his demeanor has completely I don't know if it's him just feeling the heat or something or he's being frustrated by something, but I think Klopp's demeanor and how he's been kind of acting in the past couple of weeks has also been kind of a red flag, because he's always been that coach that hops in, celebrates with his teammate, with his players. You know, obviously there's no fans in the stadium, so he's not like, you know, running out doing his little fist bump thing anymore. But it just feels like he's been really feeling the heat lately, and I think that's kind of a worrying sign, because he's been a rock for them for quite a while.
Yeah, I think Klopp is a genius when it comes to the politics of management. You know, him and Jose Mourinho both, even Pep. And I think some of it, you know, the way that he is with the press, the way that he is with the officials, I think some of it's always been politics, but there is a different feel about how he's been handling the situation over the last few weeks. And when you really, really dig down and think about it, I don't think Klopp as a manager has ever faced adversity the way he's facing it now, and has never faced pressure the way he's facing it now. When he was at Dortmund, he took a Dortmund team and made them into the best Dortmund they had really been in recent history. He brought them all the way to the Champions League final at one point. Yes, they lost, but he brought Dortmund to the Champions League final from the Bundesliga. That's huge, right? And then he goes to Liverpool and very quickly brings them from, you know, where they were to champions of the Premier League, right? They were in Champions League deep runs multiple times too with him. He's had success and a lot of success, and has not had a lot of failure in the last few years. And this is the first time he's really had to face adversity. So he needs to be that rock. He needs to be the rock for his players, because his players and the fans of Liverpool all believe in him. I mean, "In Klopp we trust" is not an unused slogan out there. So I think that he needs to make sure that he's got himself, you know, looked in the mirror and checked on first. And I have full faith that he does. I think, you know, it's just a little frustrating too, because, you know, the players aren't executing at the things that he's saying maybe, and that's frustrating, but he'll be the first to tell you that it's his fault. And I think that's the first thing of where it starts as a responsible manager, is taking the blame and not putting it on the players, and taking as much pressure off the players as he can. But yeah, he's got to work through this and see where he can get to, because if he does get through this adversity and does get Liverpool back on track and back up to the top of the table, not 6 points behind, but in contention, strong contention for it, then he will have pretty much gotten through his biggest adversity, and that'll be a scary Liverpool to deal with.
Absolutely. So I have 2 more points that I want to touch on real quick before we move on from Liverpool to City. First things first, we actually didn't talk about this at all, but I kind of just thought about this as we were talking here. So now that we've had Thiago at Liverpool for half a season, right? He's played 5 games. He's been injured for a couple of them, but if you watch Liverpool and when Thiago's playing, he does a lot for the team. He has the ball. He's the most touches on the team. He makes an impact, and it looks like he makes an impact. But Liverpool have not won a single game since he's been on the team. Do you think that it's something to do with how they play when he's on the field? Do you think that's due to these current issues that they're currently facing? What do you think might be for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's obviously I come from a very biased Thiago perspective. I'm a huge fan of Thiago with all the success that he had in Bayern Munich for many, many years. So my initial emotional reaction is of course going to say, yeah, Thiago is amazing. They're way better with him on the field. But when you do step back and kind of think about it logically, you can even put the injuries to the side. The results are the results, and it could potentially be where maybe he's having a little bit too much of an influence in that midfield, and where they are relying on everything to go through him, because it does, and he's just, that's the way he plays. He commands the midfield, and for some teams that's a good thing. But Liverpool was really gelling as a unit in their success, and where they won the Premier League last year is, I mean, it was an 11-man team. It didn't go through one person like it does with Manchester City and KDB, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. It didn't go through one person like it did with Bayern Munich. It was Thiago. I mean, it was Thiago and Kimmich, but the two of them, it was a combination from defense to midfield to offense, and a free flow between all 11 of them, where Robertson is in the attack, and Trent Alexander-Arnold is in the attack, and Henderson is wherever he needs to be, and a leader, and you've got Van Dijk holding down the fort, and all of a sudden you remove Van Dijk from the equation. You get injured at the back. You bring Thiago in. Everything's going through him. He makes great plays, but the finishing and the execution just seems a little off. Maybe that is the answer, right? Maybe Thiago doesn't stay in the lineup consistently, and they play better without him. Personally, I don't think that that's the case. I think he's just too good of a player to not have in a lineup. But something's missing, and it's an important identification of the fact that Thiago hasn't won them many matches.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that's a good question.
I feel like the thing when I look at Liverpool is that I feel like they're just short on confidence. I feel like for the first time they're truly being challenged, and I feel like they're actually feeling the pressure of being up there. I'm not sure what sparked this recent dip in that confidence, but you look at Trent Alexander-Arnold, looks like a completely different player this season. I think he had the most turnovers in a single game a few weeks ago. His consistency has completely dropped since then. Mo Salah was out of form until he finally scored in the FA Cup tie against Manchester United this past weekend. Firmino, I can't even remember the last time he scored. Sadio Mane still scores. Jota was doing well, but he's obviously been injured. So
yeah.
I guess kind of going back to the Thiago situation, I think it is a little bit more of a confidence issue, because I feel like he's definitely distributing. He's making great passes. He even took a couple of shots against United, and he does make an impact in the games that I've seen him play. So maybe it is just a lack of confidence on the upper half.
Yeah, I think too. Where the lack of confidence spurs from, and you mentioned is the word pressure, right? Like when you're champions, there's a different pressure that you have to deal with in the following season. And I'm going to compare this to some other sports here in a second. But not only are you defending champions and have a target on your back, right? You get the best of every single team in the league. They're going to put their best foot forward against you every single time. But there's a pressure of, from a fan and a media perspective of, Mo Salah, he hasn't scored, he's out of form. But Firmino, we should sell him because he hasn't scored. Thiago, he's great. Why aren't we winning games with him? Right, and that's kind of the same thing, right? You look at football with the Kansas City Chiefs. These guys are in the Super Bowl, and there are fans from Kansas City like, we didn't win by enough points, right? You look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'm a huge Lightning fan. They won the Stanley Cup. We lost our first game to Columbus the other night, and I was like, shoot, we're not undefeated anymore. Like, there's just a different level of expectations when you're the defending champions. And for the first time in a long time, Liverpool is having to deal with those expectations on top of not having fans, on top of hearing nothing but a lot of negative media, because let's face it, that's the media that's the loudest, is going to be the negativity, right? We're talking about them being out of form, them not being able to score. But at the end of the day, Mo Salah did get a goal. Maybe that turns it around for him, and maybe that's what they need. Maybe the key is Mo Salah, not Thiago. I don't know. But something has to start clicking there in order for them to get back into the top 2-3 team contention of this title race.
Yeah, and I think one more thing to kind of put a bow on this and kind of wrap it up, and so we can move on to City, is that I think they are truly missing Van Dijk in a big way as well. Because Van Dijk, I don't want to compare him to Maguire, because Van Dijk is definitely a much better center back than Maguire is. But Van Dijk also had a lot of implications on their offense. He made a lot of these great long passes, diagonal balls, in order to create space and get them to Salah and into Mo in order to stretch the field. And I feel like they're kind of lacking that right now, because Hendo is definitely a more reserved player. So if he's playing center back, he's more of the passing type. Same thing with Fabinho. They're not making those kind of extra risky switch plays that open up a ton of space for their wingers to create space. Maguire does that sometimes for us as well. So I feel like they are missing him in that sense. And I mean, we hope Liverpool's able to turn. Well, I don't hope Liverpool's able to turn around personally, but we hope that it's not a downward spiral, and eventually, Klopp is in contention for potentially losing his job. But that would be the English Premier League way at this point.
I can't imagine that happening.
I can't either.
Even if they stay in bad form, I mean, honest to God, even if they don't even qualify for Europe, I think they should keep Klopp. I really do.
I do too. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic in itself. So now we'll kind of jump over to Manchester City. Man City have won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of all 6 of their last 6 games. And the game before that, they had a draw. They have not conceded a goal, and they conceded against Chelsea on the 3rd. But otherwise, they've been the team that's been in top form with five wins in the last 5 games. What are your initial thoughts so far on Manchester City? And do you think Manchester City are the title favorites at this point?
I do, but man, KDB getting injured is a scary thing. And he's out he just got injured, right? He's out for 4 to 6 weeks, I believe. So with Kevin De Bruyne out, we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. That almost wants me to change my opinion. But I do think City's still the favorite. If they can win games without Kevin De Bruyne, absolutely they're the favorites. If not, then it may very quickly become a United and Leicester City race. I don't know, which to me, that's the last thing I predicted to have happen. But that would be the 2020 English Premier League thing to have, 2020-2021 season there. But I do think City are very deep. They have depth. They have a good manager at the helm. If anyone can overcome an injury to a star player, it's going to be them. But man, if there's any one player on that squad that I didn't want to see go down, it was Kevin De Bruyne. So that's going to be interesting to see how they stand with that. I do think that they're still the favorites. I think that they can definitely get good results with or without him, and it's going to come down to how they perform in their big games over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things to kind of highlight when you talk about Manchester City is the sudden rise of John Stones. I mean, out of nowhere, John Stones, probably 2 months ago, everyone thought that he was going to be out of the door at Manchester City because he wasn't getting any playing time. And all of a sudden Diaz comes in, and then they bring that partnership up, and they're barely conceding any goals. It's just kind of crazy to see John Stones in that type of role. He's a lot more vocal than he used to be. He jumps up for headers a lot more frequently. He's more collaborative. It's just crazy to see John Stones in that type of role. What do you think of the John Stones and the Diaz partnership so far?
I think that's going to be the key to getting through this injury for them, right? Like if they can continue to defend the way that they've been defending and no one can score on them, then there's no losing games, and that's it. Give them the title, right? But I think that that's a huge, huge benefit for them that I don't think was foreseen by any of their fans or even Pep himself, and that's like a golden nugget. That's going to be a big deal moving forward.
And I would also like to commend Pep for giving him another chance. It's easy to kind of brush him to the side when he's not playing well. You've paired him with a couple different center backs, and hasn't seen much success. But kudos to Pep for continuously giving him opportunities, and he's rewarding his manager for that faith that he's given him.
Absolutely. I apologize if my sound changes here for a second, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I haven't noticed a change at all. Right, cool. I guess so. The last thing I kind of wanted to touch on too was with KDB. I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Yeah. Foden has been in hot form, so I think Foden can honestly take that place. They have pretty good depth on the wings. They have the Sterlings, the Mahrez, all kinds of different wingers that they can put out there. And Foden's been kind of playing a little bit more of a winger role lately. But I think with Kevin De Bruyne being out, I think he'll kind of take that center attacking mid role, which is more of his natural position anyway. But Foden, he's been in hot form, and I mean, you could honestly even make a case for Foden even making the English team for the Euros this summer with how hot he's been playing.
Yeah, I think the way they're going to end up going is with him there in the cam role. I think you're going to see Rodri hold defensive mid, and then Gundogan will be the distributive midfielder there, and I think it'll work out just fine. But a part of me also wants to sit here and be like, well, Kevin De Bruyne, there's so much that goes through him. If there's one, he's like the one player that you worry about getting injured. Like, if Bayern Munich lost Lewandowski, we're probably going to lose games, right? And I just feel like City,
where they lose, United.
Right? Yeah, there's certain players on certain teams that you just fear having injuries. And for me, for City, Kevin De Bruyne was that guy. And so obviously it's a huge concern moving forward. I want to, like, part of me is like, man, they're not going to make it. It's going to be terrible. But again, because the depth that they have, because even if the trio of Foden, him, Gundogan, and Rodri doesn't work, like, someone else will step up or Pep will figure out some different way to make it work, right? They've got a lot of talent there. They've even got players they can rotate. It's not just those three. Fernandinho plays a lot too. There's a lot that you can do in that midfield with that roster, and their attack has always been pretty potent with their wingers. So I think Manchester City will be just fine. I think that they're still going to get results. I think that they're still probably the favorite to win it, especially with the form that Liverpool's had. But I think it's very important to not forget about these teams like United and Leicester City. And I know you want to talk a little bit about that moving forward, but I want to ask you the question of, we've got a huge injury to Manchester City. We've got Liverpool in a slump. We've obviously got United and Leicester right there. We also have Tottenham and Everton in the mix. If there's like any specific teams or outlook you've got thinking about moving forward, how do you foresee the rest of this back half of the season playing out with what we've got in the top six so far? Or is there a team that's not in the top six that you think is going to be contending for, top four or even a title later on too? Are these teams that are up there even going to keep their form?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and honestly, I think it's going to come down to, and I guess it's kind of obvious when you say it this way, but which team can stay consistent the longest. And I know that's kind of the general theme with how you kind of play each season in general, but I think this season more than ever, how you do against the lower half teams. If you're a team that's competing for the title, Champions League, or even potentially Europa, how you handle the games against the teams in the bottom half of the table is going to be so crucial, because we're seeing, Liverpool, they lost their first game in 70 something games or whatever it was, and it was to Burnley of all teams, and Burnley is second to last place right now.
Burnley's
at 15th right now. So but they're still down there, So that's a team that they should definitely be able to beat. Same thing with I remember United. They barely pulled out a draw against West Bromwich Albion, which is a team that we should definitely beat. So I think what it's going to come down to is, for the teams that are competing for the top, I think it's going to come down to how well you're able to beat the teams, regularly beat the teams that are in the bottom half of the table. And then obviously it's going to come down to how well you do against your fellow top six teams. I think what's going well for United at the moment is that they've pretty much drawn all of those big teams. They have, before Liverpool with the FA Cup, they haven't really been able to beat any of the big six, but they've been able to draw and still salvage a couple points. I think that's why they're ahead. So, as you can kind of see, the table is tight, and it's going to be a margin of error, I feel like, across the board. So I think what's going to be exciting the most is just we're going to see 3 or 4 teams potentially competing for this title come the last few weeks. And I think that's what's most exciting. But everyone's talking about United, City, Liverpool still being in the race despite their form, but no one's talking about Leicester. And, Brendan Rodgers, even everyone forgot about them last season as well. I know that with Project Restart, they started to dip in form and they weren't as consistent anymore. And then they dropped out of the top 4. Which is disappointing for them, but was really exciting for Chelsea and myself. But I think Leicester still have the squad and the depth to do it. Fofana has been one of the best center backs in the Premier League, and he's so young. He's like 19 years old. You have Maddison, who came back into the squad. Vardy's doing really well. Harvey Barnes has stepped up, and he's been very consistent for them. I just feel like they have a lot of good things going for them, and as long as they can stay healthy, I think they'll be one of the teams that'll be in contention, and no one will really talk about too much.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think another key thing too, that is, we talk about consistency, obviously, health and whatnot is a huge factor, but as we get into this back half of the season, when we start to get into February, March, April, May, you're going to see these teams, some of them will be in deeper non-Premier League competitions, and others won't. And I think that's going to play a factor too, right? The players' legs are going to have to stay underneath them at some point. And I think this year, more than any other, not only because of the fact that we've had a short break and we've gone straight into this season, but also the fact that there's still no fans, there's less motivation. I think you're going to have fatigue and health play a little bit of a factor, more so than most seasons. And, when you've got Manchester City's, Liverpool's, even Leicester and Europa, when they're making these deep runs into European competitions, FA Cup, and all these other things, it may not be a terrible thing if one of them isn't in a deep run to where they can have a little bit more flexibility in the lineups that they rest and the lineups that they start. I think that might play a factor in it too. But I think that consistency obviously is going to be key. Health is going to be key, and
depth too.
Depth. Yep. So that's
because
one of the reasons why I think City is for me, City's the favorite. But I think you're absolutely right on Leicester to make sure you got an eye kept on them.
Right, and you also have Manchester City and Man U. They're both competing in Europa and Champions League. Also, they're still in the FA Cup round 5. So, I mean, there's a lot of competition for them to have to play in. So, but I think between both Manchester clubs, they both have pretty strong depth, I would say. So, I mean, of any clubs, I think they're in the best position when it comes to depth. But, I think the thing is, I don't think Tottenham, I have a feeling Tottenham's going to finish 5th this season just because I feel like with their defensive setup, I think that's what's going to not win them games. So if they're winning 1-0, someone ties them, I just feel like they're not going to have that killer instinct to go out there and pull out the W. And I think that's what's going to prevent them from making top 4 this season.
I would make a counterpoint to that. I think that the way that Jose Mourinho manages and with the tournaments that they're in and everything, I think that they will consistently get points. And I think that there are games that they could lose that they'll draw. And, you say, okay, there's games that they could win that they'll probably draw. I think there's also games that they could lose that they may draw. And so I wouldn't count Tottenham out. I don't think that they're I don't know that 5th. I still see Tottenham as a top 4 team. I don't know who I would take out of the top 4 right now. Obviously, some people say, well, they're going to pass Liverpool because Liverpool is in rough form. But I'm not convinced that Liverpool won't turn that around. And I think it's going to be, a 3 or 4 team battle. And then I think it's going to be a multitude of teams battling for that 4th, 5th place spot. And I think Tottenham will end up in the top 4 still. I just don't know who they're going to replace yet.
Can you imagine come match day 38 when we're trying to decide who's going to be the winner of the league, and there's 4 teams in contention, and we're going to have to watch 4 different games at the exact same time? Like, how intense is that going to be?
Yeah, and it's intense for the players too because they won't know what's going on with the other games. Like it's because
all the bench players are going to have their audios in. They're like, oh, what's going on in this game?
Yeah, can we play for a draw or not? Like there's so much that goes into it. And if you're a manager and if you're a team, all you want to do right now is put yourself in a position where you don't have to worry about that in a positive way. If you can pull out some consistency and get enough of a point spread to where you don't have to worry about that, that would be huge. But I think that there's going to be a lot. And there are teams that aren't in the current top 6 that I think are going to be battling there, right? Does Tuchel turn Chelsea around? Does Arsenal continue to play well? Do teams like Everton, West Ham, and Aston Villa stay up there, right? Aston Villa and Everton both have 2 games at hand right now. If they win those games, they're sitting pretty.
They're in the conversation.
Yeah, they're in the conversation. So I think there are teams that haven't been in today's conversation that will be in. I think there are teams that have been in today's conversation that are still going to have more questions asked about them. And dude, we could easily have like a 8-team, like you said, match day 38 is going to be something else this year. And we started the podcast with how do you feel about it, and I'm ending it with I'm very, very excited moving forward.
Cool. Last 2 points then, and we'll kind of put a bow onto this. So You and I both predicted that Liverpool were going to win the English Premier League after the summer window had expired. So now that we are halfway through the season at this point, would you change who you think is going to win the English Premier League? And if so, what would be your top 4? I'm throwing you on the spot here. I have not put any thought into this either.
Yeah, I haven't really put a ton of thought into it. Let me get the table pulled back up real quick. I don't know. Yeah. I think it's so hard.
While you think about Liverpool. It, actually, while you think about it for a second, I'll give you mine just because I have the table up and I am kind of looking at it. I think it's going to be Manchester City that wins it. I think United will fall 2nd. Liverpool will get 3rd. And I'm going to go for a stretch and say Everton gets 4th.
Wow. Why are you going?
I'm going with a complete gamble on that one. I just have this feeling that all of a sudden they're gonna find their form again. James is gonna be on fire again. I just have a feeling that everyone's gonna be counting out the Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, that's not someone you should count out immediately. I agree with you there. And so you are changing. You had Liverpool. You're saying Manchester City wins it. I'm gonna do you one better. I think we have a split championship this year. I really do. I think that Manchester City splits it with someone. I gotta give you a team on who I think they split it with. I don't know. Wouldn't it be wild if the city of Manchester was split in half for the title?
No way. Manchester can't be purple.
I was gonna say, would you rather just not win it at all? I don't even know as a Manchester fan. I mean, obviously you'd rather split it, but God,
I don't share.
I don't know.
City.
I think it's hard for me from a pride standpoint to go back and say that I'm wrong, and I think
That's
Liverpool
fair.
is not going to do it. But I do. I think City's the favorite from here, so I'm going to say City's at the top. I think that the top four end up being Manchester City, Leicester City, Manchester United, and Tottenham. I think Liverpool ends at fifth.
You don't have to be nice to me.
I think Liverpool ends in fifth. I think Tottenham passes them. And then I think that sixth place spot is going to be an interesting one. Even though that battle for fifth is going to be crazy, I think it's going to be close. But right now you're looking at Everton, West Ham, and Villa, and we'll talk more about the European battle later on. But teams like Chelsea, Southampton, and Arsenal, I wouldn't count out either. That's going to be a fun one. We'll talk about that more in another podcast, I'm sure. But for me, I think what I would change my top four prediction to without a ton of analysis would be, City at the top. I think they're going to win.
I think that's fair. I'm not sure how the second through fourth will end up turning out because at this point anything can happen. And who knows? Even two weeks from now, when we do our next podcast, it could be completely changed out the door. Man U loses 2 games in a row. Leicester City wins 2 in a row. City loses 2. They can completely change, and that's what's so exciting about this season. So I think that'll wrap up our episode here today. A lot of great content. We're halfway through the season. There's a lot more still to come. So make sure you check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, as well as YouTube. We will be getting onto Apple Music here pretty soon. We're going to be picking up our regular content, a lot more social media posts. We'll have podcasts bi-weekly. So be sure to check us out, subscribe, follow us, do whatever you got to do so you don't miss a thing. Tyler, it's been a pleasure, my friend, and you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, everyone. Hit us up on Instagram. We love your comments. We'd like to see more. We're going to have more of a social media activity here. So definitely work on that with us. That's what we're trying to do here is have fun, discuss soccer, and grow. So with that, we love you guys.
Take care.